and suddenly I saw a thing. It was definitely human-like. It was looking at me, smiling. I just can't tell if its face was male or female. It was both and neither at the same time. It's not that I couldn't tell, it has more to do with the fact that the features of its face seemed to be constantly redefining themselves. It had small horns on the forehead, backward goat paws instead of legs, and freaking hooves instead of feet. It was awfully grotesque, sketchy even, but definitely nightmarish. I screamed my lungs out and I began to run hectically, but whatever my speed and whatever my direction, that thing kept on appearing at each and every corner, behind a rock or a tree, totally still, as if it never moved and never had to catch up. And each time it appeared to me, its smile and its laughter kept growing, like it was feeding off of my fear, so much that at the end, it was just hideous and totally inhuman. That mouth ended up filling up half of its face, and the teeth wouldn't stop growing. It was horrific.
What are skinwalkers? In the Navajo culture, a skinwalker is believed to be a type of witch, a supernaturally enhanced human ghoul hybrid, altered by dark magic. With the ability to enter the minds of its victims, they are shapeshifters that typically take three forms, that of humans, animals, and the horrific chimera of the two. Then, there are the ghouls of the Middle East. Although different from skinwalkers, in some traditions, they're also considered as witches, that being human jinn hybrids with strikingly similar attributes to their American counterparts. This includes the ability to mimic humans and animals, or exist in a permanent form that is both human and animal. From the ancient past to the 21st century, testimonies of new encounter with such entities persist. But the question is, how true are these stories? For those of you who've been with the mysterious Middle East since the beginning, you already know this story. Sometime in the early 2000s, rumors began to circulate online concerning a Kuwaiti national, a woman who we shall refer to as Fatima for the purposes of this video, that had encountered a peculiar anomaly in a quiet Kuwait city suburb that left her briefly in a comatose state. Although the story had been dismissed as a variation of a popular Middle Eastern urban legend, word had still spread from social gatherings to schoolyards and online message boards concerning a manifestation that took the form of an entire villa that, up until the evening of Fatima's encounter with it, did not exist. Fatima, a skilled oud player, received a call during the month of Ramadan from a potential client seeking her services, initially declining the offer due to the inappropriateness of performing music during this holy month. She was eventually persuaded when the client tripled her usual fee, dispatching their own driver to pick her up. She would later tell the police that as the party moved from night to morning, a group of young girls at the center of the room began to dance aggressively to the point where their legs became visible beneath their abayas. According to Fatima, their legs were horribly deformed, resembling those of a horse or large mammal, and their feet were like hooves. Terrified, she fled the villa and instructed the driver to take her home. During the journey, she explained what she had witnessed at the event, only for him to reveal beneath his thobe that he also had a deformed leg and hoofed feet. Panicked, she threw herself from the car onto the street, where she lost consciousness until sunrise. The following day, after reporting the incident, she returned to the villa with local authorities, only to find that it had vanished, leaving nothing behind but an empty lot. According to the neighbors, the land had always been vacant, leaving Fatima and the police with some troubling questions concerning her sanity. In the broadest of terms, what this musician had encountered would be categorized as a ghoul, a variation of the classical jinn. Although ghouls possess the ability to shapeshift like most jinn, traditionally, when in human form, their presence could always be identified by an unmistakable feature: the hooves of a donkey, goat, or similar mammal. Now, for hundreds of years, several traits have consistently emerged in the stories of desert travelers concerning the various types of ghouls believed to exist in remote places. The most common were the ones who took the form of a quote-unquote hideous creature, but in reality were more likely to be normal human beings who in their infancy were outcast from society due to any number of natural birth defects, ranging from a cleft lip to a deformed limb. However, another type of ghoul began to emerge in the stories of desert travelers that didn't have such a rational explanation for existing. These assumed the form of alluring women with animal limbs hidden beneath their clothing, who would often attempt to lure male travelers to horrible fates. Leaving us with a question: if the account of Fatima in 21st century Kuwait is intended to be taken seriously, are we merely dealing with a type of ghoul or something entirely different? Across the Arab world and the wider Middle East, folk stories mixed with alleged real-life encounters with human-animal hybrids are common. For example, when it comes to the ancient lore of the region, there's the pharaonic Egyptian deity known as Bisit, who was worshipped as a protector of households, mothers, children's, and childbirth. Similarly, in Iran, there's an ancient Mesopotamian entity from the late Uruk period, with the arms, torso, and head of a human, and the ears, horns, and legs of a bull. They also played the role of a deadly yet kind protector. Unfortunately, in the modern age, entities that match the aforementioned Egyptian and Persian descriptions are nearly always considered as threats. In Kuwait and wider GCC folklore, an entity known as Himarat Al-Gayla is said to haunt the bright afternoon sunlight, searching for children to devour, typically described as mimicking the appearance of an elderly woman. This being is either described as a hominid with two horse-like legs, or as an upright standing hoofed mammal that only from a distance looks human. A similar entity to this is the equally demonic yet dangerously seductive temptress known as Umm Al Duwais. However, unlike Al-Gayla, whom most accept as nothing more than a fictional monster invented for parents to dissuade children from going out in the hot afternoon sun, there have been, and continues to be, numerous accounts of real-life encounters with Umm Al Duwais. In most stories, she assumes the form of a strikingly attractive woman, often described as slim, sultry, and incredibly elegant, while emitting a strong perfume-like aroma that generates a perception-altering effect on her targets. Survivors of encounters with this entity frequently report feelings of extreme dread and hypnotic allure, making them susceptible to her advances. And in the late 1970s, one witness recalled an unusual encounter with her. Retold on several Arabic language blogs, the witness and a friend, while traveling through one of the Gulf states, became lost after they mistakenly took a wrong turn due to bad weather. After a while of driving aimlessly, they noticed the distant red taillights of another vehicle come into view ahead, and so decided to follow them until they reached a familiar area. While this admittedly sounds like the beginning of an urban legend, as you will see, it's consistent with other such real-life encounters. After trailing the vehicle for some time, The witness recalled that something appeared to be slightly off, as the distance between the two cars always remained perfectly fixed, matching their speed no matter how much his driver accelerated or decelerated. When the red glow from the taillights appeared to come to a halt, and their car finally began to catch up, they were shocked to see that the source of these two red beams were not from a car, but from two women walking. Each of them illuminated from their backs with clothing that either emitted a red light or was a red-colored material that reflected the white light that bounced off from the driver's head beams. As the car now accelerated past these women, the driver warned his passenger to avoid looking at their faces, uttering, "Don't be a madman. That is Umm Al Duwais." Fortunately, in this instance, the woman did not seem interested in pursuing them, just toying with them. Unfortunately, when the men reached their destination and detailed to the locals what they had encountered, it was explained that the route they took has a history of unusual occurrences, so has consequently developed a reputation for being haunted. Across the Gulf, this female anomaly has been described in a variety of ways. Some reports suggest that her calves and feet are sickle-shaped, emphasizing her lethal capabilities. However, in most instances, she is described as having hoofed legs, most commonly resembling that of a horse or a donkey. Taking us back to our first case study in the early 2000s, Kuwait, in addition to a particularly disturbing encounter in Morocco, also occurring during the late 1970s. Here, an entity very similar to Umm Al Duwais was reported to have manifested on a remote farm approximately 40 kilometers from Tangier. One afternoon, one of the youngest members of the family who owned this farm, a 7-year-old Belgian boy of Moroccan descent, claimed he encountered an androgynous-looking being that, although clearly humanoid in form, had small horns on its forehead, backward goat legs, and hoofs instead of feet. In a manner exactly like our lost motorists in the Gulf. When he took off running, the creature followed in pursuit, but always maintained the distance, never quite reaching him, but always remaining in sight, as if it's teasing him. Eventually, his grandmother heard his screams as he reached closer to the home on his farm, but with the creature no longer pursuing him, of course she put his encounter down to imagination. Yet, for the next 3 days, he became deathly ill, but gradually recovered due to the intervention of an Islamic healer, who at that time heard his grandmother referred to by the name of Kandisha, an important detail we will come back to shortly. "5 years later, at a museum in Belgium, he was introduced to the Greek mythological beings known as the Satyrs. These entities, according to lore, are half human, half goat, and to the boy's fright, almost exactly match the description of the anomaly he encountered in Tangier.
When I was about 12 years old, we visited a museum with my school in Belgium, and at some point, we happened to see a satyr on a painting, and it struck me because it was exactly what I saw 5 years earlier in the Moroccan countryside. Except that what I saw was a hermaphrodite and way more evil. I know it's a Greek and Roman mythology, and that it's not even remotely related to Morocco, but that's what I saw anyway. And that was the first time I ever heard about ancient mythologies, so I couldn't have made that up 5 years earlier. However, I didn't investigate at that time because I didn't realize that there was anything to investigate. I mean, a satyr in Morocco is just too long of a stretch, but it's definitely something that at least validated what I saw with my own eyes, so I don't know.
However, there was one key difference. Satyrs are unambiguously male and associated with hedonism, hence why in art and sculpture, they are sometimes shown sporting a huge erect penis. This is a significant detail, because if you remember, the cryptid or Djinn the boy encountered was androgynous, lacking any clearly defined male or female traits.
However, the part that is the most disturbing is that not so long ago, About 10 years ago at most, I stumbled upon the word Aisha Kandisha online. No way I could have forgotten that name. When I saw the name, I realized that my family hadn't actually been talking about the healer when they said that name back then. They were referring to a Moroccan folklore. Indeed, Aisha Kandisha happens to actually be a mythological character, half witch, half Djinn, that seems to be part of the Moroccan culture, especially near Tangier, and it is documented as such. It is supposed to take the appearance of a woman in remote lands in order to seduce and end the lives of men. The most interesting part is that she is described as having the legs of a hoofed animal such as a goat or camel. This blew my mind. I couldn't have made this shit up 38 years ago. I can totally understand that people, especially kids, can make some memories up, but it is hard to make up something that you heard about only 28 years later. The strangest thing is that I am a rational guy, to my bones. I don't believe in gods, or superstitions or ghosts or anything like that, but I saw what I saw, and I can tell the difference between a hallucination and an actual encounter. But to me, it is more than a satyr or a witch. The fact that I got sick after encountering it makes me believe she is a succubus of some sort. I feel like she partially drained something out of me, but couldn't complete her job entirely. And I know she will eventually find me, and she will finish whatever she started.
Nearly all accounts of Aisha Kandisha identify her home as a nearby body of water. In Tangier, this is thought to be the sea. In Tetuan, it is the Martil River. In Fez, it's a drainage canal. And among the Beni Ahsan, it is the Siwa River. There's also a general agreement that she primarily targets young men whom she entices with her beauty, or by mimicking the voices and appearances of their wives, akin to the America's skinwalkers. According to the Bufi Sufi tradition, she's one of a number of female jinn with a given name Aisha, and all of those jinn have different personalities. And like in Gulf folklore, the Bufis believe these class of jinn to be human-animal hybrids with horse or camel-like feet. Recently, members of the Moroccan women's football team, At+5, spoke to the media on their encounter with a spectral entity whom they believe was Aisha Kandisha. They state that upon observing a lone woman walking on a deserted road ahead of their bus during the early hours of the morning, they realized that this person could not be human because it instantly generated an intense, irrational emotion of paralyzing fear in who observed it. Speaking on a Channel 2 television program, one of the team members who identified herself as Namia said the following.
We saw her around on the road linking the cities of Agadir and Essaouira around 2 in the morning, wearing a white robe and red hair. Me, the bus driver and the team leader, Mohammed, stopped at a distance from where we saw her and kept wondering who this person is, as she was somehow making us feel a fear so strong it ran throughout our entire bodies.
Their coach Muhammad also confirmed Naima's story, adding,
My eyes met hers after she turned towards us and turned back very quickly. I do not believe that she is a fairy, but I have a feeling that she is not human.
In the previous episode where we spoke of similar encounters with a variety of shadow entities within the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan's Batn Ghul mountain, we introduced the female entity known as Sil'awa and her possible connection to Mesopotamian and Jewish folklore via the mythology of the succubus Lilith. Here we hinted that Sil'awa could either be a class of jinn that possesses the same attributes as Lilith, or simply a regionalized interpretation of the Lilith myth itself. Likewise, the same can be said for Aisha hundreds of miles away on the other side of the MENA region in West Africa, an opinion shared by historians and academics deeply familiar with the North African and Middle Eastern folklore. So for your reference, a succubus is a demon or supernatural entity that takes on a female form, appears in dreams to seduce men, whereupon she will take the resulting fluid of their entanglement to produce offspring. According to the Jewish esoteric text known as Zohar and the medieval rabbinical text, the Alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith was Adam's first wife, who later became a succubus. She left Adam and refused to return to the Garden of Eden after she mated with the archangel Samiel. In contemporary encounters, creatures like her typically take the form of a beautiful young girl in order to seduce men. Needless to say, the detail of the act of procreation is not only too R-rated for YouTube to mention, but it was quite often traumatic for the men forced to take part. But those of you who caught the mysterious Middle East dark a couple of years ago will know when it comes to intimate relations between ghouls and humans. It's the humans that are usually left in a bad state, such as in the unsolved mystery, where from the mid-90s for an entire decade, many of the male residents of a Tanzanian village found themselves haunted by one or more anomalies that can be considered as the male equivalent to the succubi, the incubi. Those incubuses would invade its selected victim's dream, who were always men typically aged between their mid-teens to late 60s, induce a state of sleep paralysis within them, and then aggressively engage them in an intimate act. Now, what differentiates these incubi and succubi from Aisha is that the instance of these entities would typically manifest as shadow beings, only appearing in the dreams of its victims and rarely in the waking world. Therefore, it can easily be argued that most alleged encounters with these entities may never have been real to begin with, only being psychological. On a side point, while this is the most likeliest explanation for the majority of such alleged paranormal interactions, the Tanzanian case study does have an additional caveat where physical male fluid not belonging to the victims but believed to be discharged from the incubi itself were found deep within claw marks that had anomalously appeared on the backs of some of the men upon waking up from their sleep paralysis. Yeah, it's messed up. Anyway, Aisha is different, simply because she's not normally associated with the dream realm, but typically known to primarily manifest in the physical world. However, the most interesting thing about her is her backstory, which we alluded to earlier. Like Lilith, Aisha was once human, but unlike Lilith, she's not an ancient eldritch type creature, but something that came into existence relatively recently. How recent? 17th century Morocco, where it seems Portuguese invaders may have been responsible for her existence in more ways than you can imagine. Along with Mauritania, Morocco, at the northernmost point of Africa, represents the outer reaches of the Arab world. Since the medieval period, European nations have fought over its sands, which is why in the modern age, not only is Arabic its official language, but also English, French, and Spanish are widely spoken. During this time of European colonial expansion into Africa, an Andalusian countess emerged as one of the region's deadliest members of Morocco's resistance. The Portuguese called her Aisha the Countess, or Contessa Aisha, with her method of unaliving countless invaders becoming well known. It's narrated that she would lure soldiers of the Crusades into the wilderness one by one, and then drag them into any body of water like swamps, valleys, and lakes, ending their existence. She became so efficient with this method of fighting, both the Portuguese and even the Moroccans began to think that she was not human. However, while this more grounded version of her story illustrates that her supernatural abilities may be nothing more than an urban legend, some say that the grief and anger she felt upon initially losing her family to the Portuguese was so potent and intense It actually caused her to undergo a literal physiological change, transforming her essence from human to something beyond human, which is why in the 21st century, she still haunts deserted areas, forever doomed to lure men to their fate, in the same way she did with the Portuguese centuries ago. Akin to Umm Al Duwais, in many traditional folktales, Kandisha is portrayed as a shapeshifter known to sometimes take the form of a beautiful woman, where she would specifically target adult men residing alone in remote areas. However, there are some key differences between her and the entity known as Umm Al Duwais, who is arguably more dangerous. Unlike many creatures associated with Arabian folklore, our Gulf variant is not limited to manifesting in empty or isolated areas of the desert. More often than not, stories of beings matching the anomaly's description and behavior are known to materialize in residential neighborhoods, small towns, and even large cities. Basically, anywhere where there are humans. Umm Al Duwais has often described as appearing at the doors of villas and apartments, requesting to see the males of the household, often requiring some kind of assistance with the primary objective of luring these men out of the home. Although the entity's method of killing have not been consistently documented, since once a man has been taken away by her, he'll likely become just another missing person case. Some folktales say she only skews her victims with her sickle-like arms, while others write that she eats them. Academically speaking, cultural anthropologists and literary historians believe that she's nothing more than a cautionary concept designed to warn men, especially married ones, to be faithful to their wives and not be seduced by the charms of any beautiful woman they may encounter. For example, the Emirati writer Maitha al-Suwaidi states that Umm Al Duwais is simply a fictional scarecrow used to keep young men off the streets during the late hours. Thematically, in more recent times, she's also become a symbolic representation of the ugliness of jealousy and the brutal nature of revenge, manifesting as a creature who wreaks havoc on behalf of any woman cheated on. Thus, this is why in much of the folk stories where she appears, it's only men who are at risk and susceptible to her cognitive abilities. However, that is only according to academic folklore. What about other documented alleged real-life instances that have been reported across numerous Arabic language blogs, message boards, and even touristy news sites based out of the Gulf? Assuming that at least a fraction of these encounters have a kernel of truth to them, quite often when this anomaly appears at the home of a potential victim, if it encounters another woman instead of a man, her psychic means of seduction turns to manipulation. Since the entity's ultimate aim is to attack men, any woman she encounters during her hunt would have to be convinced with the use of only words to summon the male members of the household to the door, where they would be swiftly lured away and never seen again. Now, watching this video from the safety of your home, you may have a false sense of security, thinking that these types of entities are only found in the Middle East and North Africa. However, instances of these anomalies have been reported globally, commonly appearing in fairy tales, but more frighteningly, in real life. For example, in Trinidadian folklore in the Caribbean, there's the La Diablesse, who according to tradition was an enslaved African woman who made a deal with the devil in exchange for eternal beauty. The payment in return was for her to become a demi-demon, who is often portrayed in stories and alleged real-life encounters as a stunningly attractive woman with a goat's leg that haunts villages at night. In other parts of Latin America and Asia, similar night horrors have been written about. So what exactly are we dealing with here? So far, we've presented these anomalies as Djinn-like creatures, be they real or folkloric. However, Skeptics could argue that these are merely psychological manifestations that humans across all cultures share. Hence, why Emirati folklore has similarities to Trinidadian folklore. Humans with animal hindquarters are a fundamentally terrifying concept. Furthermore, it could be argued that the Portuguese, a common denominator linking the Gulf, North Africa, and Latin America through colonial exploration and conflict, could have played a hand in mimetically spreading such terrifying ideas through all parts of the world. Within their own folklore, there is an entity known as Mulher de Pernas de Cabra, who appears in the Lenda de Dama Pé de Cabra, the tale of the goat-footed lady. Yet, a creepy counter-argument that simultaneously support this theory suggests that the creature of the underworld and other dimensions are essentially formless, made from fire. It's only through the spreading of ideas of what scares humans the most do they know what forms to take when manifesting in our world, choosing to appear in the guise of our darkest nightmares. In the next episode, we will stay in Tangier and the Mediterranean to examine a 2023 discovery that could shed light not only on the horrors of the mythical creatures that are rumored to haunt the shores of the region, but also a lost civilization rumored to exist beneath the Straits of Gibraltar that may be alien in origin. Until then, guys, avoid any strange women and girls. Keep an eye out on your guys. There may be monsters out there. Like, subscribe, and please share, and we'll see you in the next one.